Thank you very much, Meg. And again, Professor Evans, thank you so much for joining us in the conversation. This is obviously a very important and timely conversation. When you combine knowledge of technology and then money, those are two pretty impressive, intimidating fields all in their own. So the combo together is definitely a powerhouse. So we're really excited to be able to chat with you today, ask you questions, basically get schooled on the topic. And let's just dive right in. If you could first just introduce yourself in your own words and kind of what you do, and tell us a little bit more about, your career journey and how you first became interested in cryptocurrency in the first place.
So thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here. And I love even how you started, because what we are talking about today really is the intersection of finance and tech, but also very much the sweet spot is empowerment. And we'll talk about that later, but that is the idea of that is what ushered me in order to want to find out more. And then obviously the educator in me wanted to take it a step further, not just to make sure that my future lawyers, my lawyers in training, are really prepared to show up for the future of work and entrepreneurship and money, but that I was well positioned too, because I'm kind of mid-career. And so I'm always looking for what's next. So I'm an intellectual property, entertainment law, and innovation lawyer by training, focused mostly with my practice in the early years. Interestingly, I don't even say it anymore, but I actually started in big law in trust and estates. I was at Drinker, Biddle, and Reith and Pepper Hamilton doing sophisticated planning for high net worth individuals. And so it's interesting where I am now given that path. But part of that actually did serve me well, because I focused so much on leveraging assets to create generational wealth, to delay and defer taxes on one hand, to grow a sizable estate, not as a matter of high income, which is taxed at a high level, but what about appreciable assets and capital assets for this generation and the next. And so that actually is serving me well, and we'll talk about that in a moment, given how crypto is taxed. I'm also a law professor, as you mentioned, at the Penn State Dickinson Law School. And I came here as a visitor because I was transitioning from University of New Hampshire School of Law and serving as the associate dean there and building that program, and really wanted to figure out what my next move was going to be in this part of my career. So I wanted to kind of take a pause and take a breath, and I had the freedom, thankfully, to do that. I think we as women don't always have that opportunity, right? We usually have our head down. I had some space. I think, the silver lining, and we have to find one in the pandemic, was the opportunity to really sit still and reflect on what this next version of myself would be. So definitely coming to Penn State Dickinson, and now I've accepted a tenured position here that begins July 1, so I've made this my permanent home. Always, I am also the CEO of me. And so I'm on loan in various places for W-2 income, but I'm the CEO of me, and that's an empowering point of deciding where I'm spending my personal and professional time from a position of power. And I'm the host of a weekly podcast called Tech Intersect, where I get to talk about the intersection of technology and business and law. And I've been doing a lot around the crypto space and NFT space. We'll talk about those things in a moment. Graduated from Northwestern, where I played on scholarship. I played tennis on scholarship, and I played tennis professionally, fun fact, for 4 years before I went to law school at the Howard University School of Law. So that's what I've done in my short time on this earth.
Wow, that's an impressive journey. I love that. And Northwestern, so you're not too far from where I'm based here right now, the Midwest. Okay, cool. And so, before we dive into, more deeply into all of this conversation, it would be helpful to, define some of the main terms that we're going to be talking about.
Right.
And I don't know, I think starting with what is cryptocurrency would be a good place. And then,
Yes.
Bitcoin, blockchain, NFTs are now being talked about a lot too. Kind of
They are.
take us,
They're all the rage. They're all the craze.
exactly.
I did hot topics with my entertainment law class today, and I don't know if I've just indoctrinated them, but a lot of the topics happen to be about non-fungible tokens now, so they're all getting A's, but don't let them know. In order to really understand what cryptocurrency is, I usually start with what money is, because I find that we don't have a great appreciation just for what money is. Because one of the questions or comments more that I receive is what cryptocurrency is backed. It's like this magic internet money. Where is it? Where does the money reside? We don't know, particularly when it comes to crypto, but we don't have a fundamental appreciation for money. And I'm focusing specifically on the US dollar in particular. So when I think of money, not just how I think of it, but how we should view money, or how money has traditionally been viewed, is a social contract. It's a social agreement. The dollar has not been backed by gold for decades. That is also magic money, right? It's magic money for a number of ways. It's magic because 43% of the dollars in circulation right now have been printed in the last year, causing a lot of inflationary concerns. Money is a social agreement, a contract. It requires trust that it is what it is and that it is not counterfeit, that a sufficient number of people actually hold it. Or else if I just have a Tonya coin or a Tonya dollar, that doesn't mean anything unless I get others to buy into it. Sellers, merchants have to accept it, right? So merchants see its value, accept it as a form of payment, and society as a whole has to believe in the value, not just today, but that money is going to maintain its value over time. We bought into that as a social contract. Our dollar is backed by the full faith and credit of the government. It is the global reserve currently. Let's talk about that in 10 years and see where it sits as it relates to cryptocurrency. And then I think about the concept of value, which leads into where crypto gets its value, where money in general gets its value. It's interesting now because crypto is a decentralized form of money, and I'll define that in a moment. But to compare and contrast it to a very centralized form of money issued by governments, government issued money is known as fiat. And we had a system of barter and exchange before physical cash. So it's almost like crypto is returning to what was old. What's old is now new, I guess I should say it that way. Value used to be represented, and in some cultures still is represented by something other than a dollar, printed cash or coins. Seashells, salt, sugarcane, gold, silver, unfortunately, human beings, right? So the representation of the transfer of value. Some things are inherently valuable. We look at them if we were in a place and I was a cobbler, I'm making shoes and you were raising chickens. We could decide what the relative value of your chickens versus shoes, and we could make an exchange that didn't include money. But generally speaking, when that happened, we were in a society, a smaller version, a village, a town. Everybody knows each other, everybody trusts each other. You're going on word is bond, right? That was a person or a family that represented value. As society got larger and we wanted to engage in other transactions with people who we didn't know, and therefore people we didn't trust, we had to find some trusted party to facilitate that transaction. That became banks, that became governments. And so we evolved away from the trust within a trusted circle of families to the trust in institutions. And we abdicated, we turned over a lot of power in that regard. The concern with, and fast forwarding to what is crypto, and we'll talk specifically about Bitcoin because it's the first cryptocurrency. There were other digital cash projects before Bitcoin. But Bitcoin is considered the game changer because Bitcoin as a protocol did three things. And I have to talk about blockchain in order to talk about crypto, but cryptocurrency is digital cash. And it is cash that allows you to facilitate payments with someone on a peer-to-peer basis that doesn't require a government, a bank, or another intermediary. And I analogize it to like the late 90s. You'll remember we have peer-to-peer technology now. So some have grown up in a time where you know what peer-to-peer means. But the late 90s is when that first technology came into existence, where Napster, Grokster, BitTorrent, all of those protocols allowed us to disintermediate music at the time, right? The music industry was freaking out because now you can make a perfect digital copy of an MP3 and send it from, your room and fuzzy slippers to 1,000 of your closest friends. And so think of peer-to-peer cash in the same way, not physically represented, but a way that we can transact easily, quickly, inexpensively. I could send money to someone in Ghana right now, and it could get there in minutes, not days. And it would be actually the amount of money I sent, not a shell of its former self by it went through all of the intermediaries. The final thing I'll say about blockchain, the way that crypto and blockchain are interrelated, think of blockchain as simply a record of transactions and balances. It is a database. It is a software protocol. So our banks have ledgers and they have to settle accounts at the end of the day. Instead of a bank or a government settling transactions, there's the software protocol that does that. We use Bitcoin as the example. It's coded with certain rules and it's checking transactions and balances, and that's what it does. I would liken it to like a group text, right? So it's maintained by computers, and if I delete a group text from my phone, it still exists. As long as one person still has the record, it still exists. Think of a blockchain in the same type of decentralized way.
Excellent. That was awesome. I was taking notes in real time. So when it comes to defining then Bitcoin, you said like that was the game changer. Can you talk more about how we define Bitcoin, what it is, and also like the concept of like mining? It feels so abstract too.
Yes. So Bitcoin was created by this figure whom we don't know, named Satoshi Nakamoto. Since we're guessing and we don't know if man, woman, non-identifying, a group, an entity, I'm going to say Satoshi Nakamoto is a woman. It's clear to me, but I'm biased, so whatever, it's fine. And in 2000, Bitcoin was first, the software protocol was first released in January of 2009. But Satoshi issued a white paper in 2008. It's like 9 pages, 9 footnotes, changed the world. I write 50-page papers and I've been wasting my life. I should have just written a 9-page paper with 9 footnotes and I'd be much farther along in my career. But Satoshi created Bitcoin because of a distrust of government, concerns of big business. We were having an economic crisis, a meltdown in 2008, 2009. Although we don't necessarily know if it was directly correlated. People have been working on this before, but it was to solve for the double spend problem, which if I had $100 and I sent 100 to you and then purported to send 100 to Mary, but I only have 100, the first person to actually cash in is the one that's going to win. And it's the double spend problem that was of concern with peer-to-peer technology as well that we mentioned earlier, that I could have an MP3 and I could create a copy, and now we have 2. I haven't extinguished the previous one. Cryptographic protocols was the third thing. Internet, peer-to-peer technology, and cryptography, which is a method of encryption, and also that was providing security by the way that the ledger that we talked about earlier is maintained by decentralized computers instead of one person. And those computers are running Bitcoin protocol software that's testing every single transaction that comes through. It can't do a lot of transactions at once. It's never going to, I don't know if it's never, but it's not processing payments like Visa, but it's secure and it can't be changed. And once something is recorded to a blockchain, we call it immutable because you can add things to it, but you can't delete. And that is a game changer for record keeping and also for sovereignty over your own money. That now we are in control of it in a way. I don't think that it's going to replace, until government doesn't exist, it's not likely to replace government money. They are living peacefully right now. But it's another alternative, and it's definitely causing a customer service issue in the banking institution, to be sure.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you. When it comes to crypto, are there any other uses beyond, currency?
So I do speak more broadly about crypto assets, because not all crypto assets function as currencies. When there's a proper I don't have the definition in front of me, but when you think of a currency, something that operates purely as a currency, you know that it is a unit of account, You know that it is a medium of exchange, can serve as a store of value. There's one other thing that's escaping me right now, but there's like an actual definition of currency, right? But some actually don't function in that way. There are, first of all, there are over 8,500 and counting. It might be 8,700, maybe 9,000 by now. There are some top 10, top 5. You should focus, if you are not yet in this ecosystem, on getting some Bitcoin first and figuring out how that works, and not wasting your time on a lot of other coins that have different protocols and they function differently. One of the most important things about Bitcoin that I didn't say is that there's a limited supply. So in that way, people often consider it to be more like gold than the dollar, for a couple of reasons. One, it's taxed as a capital asset, so it's either going to have capital gains or losses. Two, it's a finite amount. There will always and only ever be 21 million, and 19 plus million are currently in circulation right now. So we're experiencing a major jump in value because we're getting closer and closer in time when the last Bitcoin will be mined. Mining is kind of a conversation for a different day, but mining essentially is the ability to add a new block of verified transactions to the Bitcoin chain. And that's where you get the blocks in a chain, blockchain. So every 10 minutes or so, whatever transactions have been verified within that 10-minute period, they are distilled into what we call a hash, alphanumeric hash. That becomes the digital footprint of that particular batch of transactions. And if you've been in retail or something, you don't settle every single Visa transaction when it comes in. You batch them at the end of the day. This is the same type of process. In a mining process, staying at a high levels, adding a new block every 10 minutes to the Bitcoin blockchain. But the fact that it's 21 million and not being created over and over again adds to its value as well. Final point to your question, excuse me. You can do a lot of things with crypto that you can do with cash, but you can also use it within a platform to have some type of use, some type of utility within a platform, either maybe to vote or to reduce fees if you're on an exchange or something like that. Those tokens also have a secondary value. They can be used as currency, but they may have some other primary purpose. Decentralized finance is something people should look into as well, where once you hold crypto, you can lend it, you can loan it, you can earn what we would consider to be interest at very aggressive rates. And that is also a game changer for people who are traditionally marginalized. I don't have to, give my credit report. I don't have to go and show up or send somebody else who's not Black to make sure I get the best rate. Do I have Bitcoin or not? And if I do, I can leverage it in that way. So decentralized finance is another really exciting way to use crypto assets.
Wow, that's fascinating and amazing. So when it comes to, how can blockchain technology in particular disrupt some other well-established industry practices in the future?
One of the most exciting, and it may lead us to, I'm mindful of the time. I don't know if we'll take the deep dive into non-fungible tokens, but I do want to mention it because it's one of those additional ways. It's a different type of token. But I also think it's really exciting in supply chain. Folks may have seen, I haven't seen it as much recently, but IBM was kind of out of the gate to have supply chain. They were using the blockchain to record supply chain issues. The reason is, do you remember when we were anytime there's this salmonella scare with I don't know why it's usually romaine lettuce, and we have to take all of the romaine lettuce off of the shelves because we don't know where it came from? Blockchain solves that for the reasons that I mentioned earlier, because it's this verified ledger database record of things from point A to point Z. So think of the trust that is required in supply chain to get verified non-blood diamonds from the mine to a finger, or romaine from one place to another, or to give provenance because there's some verified record of artwork, things of that nature. So that doesn't necessarily require a cryptocurrency or a token, but it does really benefit from decentralized technology. All of those people along the chain don't necessarily know each other, but they have to trust each other to get from point A to point Z. So, and it's disrupting so many different areas, every particular sector. I do this with my From Cash to Crypto students. The first part of what they do is go out and search blockchain and the name of your industry and just see what comes up. Read what comes up. It's clearly disrupting the practice of law. There's something called smart contracts, automating certain aspects of natural language contracts. That's a game changer for this industry. It's obvious in the finance world, but things like identity, it's really great. If I go to a bar and I look, I don't look as young as I used to, so I don't really get carded anymore. But for those of you who do, they don't need to know where you live. It's actually a crisis. If a bouncer now knows where a woman lives, and a male bouncer, I'm using like this heteronormative approach to this question, they don't need to know. They just need to know that I'm old enough to drink or old enough to get in. And so having a decentralized way to show up with identity is another really interesting way. And credentialing is something that's happening in education.
Excellent. So I know we have about 6 minutes left, and we actually had a question come in from the audience that I want to get to from Judy, who asked, do you ever see this currency introduced into the economy or retirement systems like 401ks?
There is a lot of conversation. Some financial institutions are dragging their feet. I will not name call today, but if you haven't received an email giving you this option, then you know which ones are not yet participating. There's some ahead of the curve here. And it's been risky. It's highly volatile, right? Last year, my students got in at like $10,000 in June for Bitcoin. I didn't check the price today. It was like 58,000. There's no other asset I know that performs like that. And it could go down to 20,000 tomorrow. So that is very difficult for traditional finance to grapple with, because their goal is prudent, sound, slow, long-term growth. And that has not traditionally been this, but gold wasn't that way in the beginning of its existence either. But I absolutely see this being a part. There are a number of traditional financial institutions that are now wanting to leverage Bitcoin to get it on their balance sheet or give exposure to their clients. And they know that if they don't, someone else will. And so you will start to see that as an option. I've gotten a few calls from people that there are a lot of technical rules around being a trustee and being a prudent investor and the Prudent Investors Act. So it might be slow and steady, but you will see this as an option, both on the retirement side and just an investment, having some diversification in this type of asset class going forward.
That's super helpful. Thanks, Professor Evans. So, we have about 4 minutes, so I'm trying to figure out which question to ask you, but because I definitely want you to talk a little bit about how someone could learn more, because you have a really awesome course that you run. Before we get into that, is there one thing you would say that's a most common misconception about crypto or Bitcoin or blockchain?
I think it's that it's purely used for nefarious purposes. There's drug money and things like that. And the concern, it always confounds me, because the number one currency used in criminal activity around the world is the United States dollar, including evidently some people use it to actually use drugs. So there's that. No one is using Bitcoin to actually physically use drugs. So it's kind of just, there was some definite issues with a particular platform that had been hacked, but that has happened to every institution, including the traditional institutions that we hold dear. Oftentimes we'll get a notice that says they've been breached. It's because they're centralized and not decentralized. The Bitcoin blockchain has never been hacked. It's exchanges that are centralized holding. So that's the most common misconception, but also understandable.
Yeah, that's super helpful. Awesome. Well, thank you again so much for sitting down with us and getting into the nuts and bolts of this and getting some kind of demystifying this for us. And if people want to learn more, can you tell us, how they can tell us more about the course that you specifically run for this?
Absolutely. I have an onboarding course focused mostly on, it's open to everyone, but I'm particularly interested in empowering women, people of color to get off the sidelines and get in. We tend to be very cautious, and necessarily so. Both as women and people of color have been burned by the system. And so I wanted to provide a way for people to onboard at various levels. And so I have a number of different courses in my From Cash to Crypto program. It's on demand, 365 access with live coaching as well. And also, you all have heard about non-fungible tokens or NFTs or NFTs. People sells, one for $69 million. And I'm also created another course to protect creators and investors or collectors in the space. And so I have master classes that are free. I have courses at various levels. And you can find out information about all of that at advantageevans.com. So I made it super easy, advantageevans.com, and all of the information about both the free master classes and the courses. Some cohorts are opening soon, so definitely visit me, submit a question, and we can keep the convo going. I'm also on Twitter in my not so spare time at IPProf, as in professor, IPProf Evans. So happy to continue the conversation there as well.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Professor Evans. Thanks. I'm definitely going to check out your course. Like I said, I personally invested in something like this. Really cool. I'm going to hand the reins over back to Megan, our wonderful host of today. And thank you again, everyone, for joining us.